Visions AI.
Shadows in the attic. I never believed in ghost stories until I spent a night in the old house I found on a well-known home-sharing platform. It seemed like the perfect getaway nestled in the woods, isolated and quiet. When I arrived, the house was as charming as the photos suggested, sitting on the edge of a dense forest with cool air carrying the scent of pine. The key was in a lockbox by the door, which creaked as I pushed it open. Inside the house was warm and welcoming, with old wooden beams and soft worn furniture. I quickly made myself at home, brewing a cup of tea and settling down with a book by the fire. The quiet was a relief from the constant noise of the city. As night fell, a chill crept into the room. No matter how much I stoked the fire, I brushed it off as just the old house and the cool night air. Around 10 p.m., I headed upstairs to bed. The bedroom was cozy, with a large bed and a view of the treetops. I snuggled under the blankets, the house now eerily silent, except for the occasional creak. Just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard a faint thud from above. My eyes snapped open and I listened intently. The sound came again, louder, like something moving in the attic. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, maybe the wind or a small animal, but then I heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, shuffling across the attic floor. My heart pounded as I listened, the footsteps growing closer to where I lay below. Curiosity got the better of me. I slipped out of bed, grabbed my phone for light, and cracked out of the bedroom. The stairs to the attic were hidden behind a small door at the end of the hallway, slightly ajar, as if someone or something had left it open. With my heart racing, I pushed the door open wider. The stairs were narrow and steep, and my phone's light barely penetrated the darkness above. Each step creaked loudly, echoing in the confined space. When I reached the top, I hesitated before opening the attic door. The attic was freezing, much colder than the rest of the house. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me. As I scanned the room with my phone's light, the space was cluttered with old furniture and boxes, their shadows shifting eerily. Then I saw it, a shadow that didn't belong to anything in the room. It moved on its own, sliding across the wall and ceiling. My heart raced as I watched, frozen in place. The shadow grew darker, more defined until it took the shape of a person. A tall, thin figure with no features, just a void of blackness. Panic set in and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a box. The shadow moved closer, silent and menacing, reaching out toward me. I turned and bolted down the stairs, slamming the attic door behind me. My heart was in my throat as I ran to the bedroom, grabbed my keys and phone, and rushed out of the house without looking back. I drove to the nearest town, my hands shaking as I tried to catch my breath. I spent the rest of the night in my car, too scared to return. The next morning I went back to the house, just long enough to grab my things. The place looked the same as when I arrived, but the air felt different, heavy, like something was still watching me. I left the key in the lockbox and got out of there as fast as I could. To this day, I don't know what I saw in that attic, but I can still feel the cold chill whenever I think about it. Now every time I pass an old house, I wonder what might be lurking in the shadows, just out of sight, waiting for someone to stumble upon it. No more vacation home getaways for me. Not ever again. The Haunted Dollhouse.
Visions AI.
It was supposed to be an ordinary, quiet evening at home. My parents were out of town, leaving me to enjoy the house alone. I'd just settled on the couch, ready to binge watch a show, when the doorbell rang. It was odd. No one ever visited this late, especially unannounced. When I opened the door, no one was there. But on the doorstep was a small, brown package. No address, no note, just a plain box. Curiosity piqued. I brought it inside and carefully unwrapped it, revealing a small, old dollhouse. It looked antique, beautifully detailed with tiny rooms and furniture, like a miniature replica of a real home. Inside the dollhouse was a doll, only a few inches tall, wearing a white dress. Her face was delicately painted, almost too lifelike. As I stared at it, a strange unease crept over me. The doll seemed to be watching me, its tiny eyes following my every move. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just a toy, nothing to be scared of. But the longer I sat there, the more the unease grew. The house was too quiet, the shadows too long. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to distract myself, but my eyes kept drifting back to the dollhouse. Every time I looked, it felt like the doll's position had shifted, as if it had moved when I wasn't looking. By the time I decided to head to bed, my nerves were on edge. I turned off the lights and went upstairs, but sleep was elusive. Every creak of the house made me jump. It was probably just the wind, or the house settling, but it felt like something more. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. A soft, creaking sound, like wood bending under weight. My heart pounded as I realized it was coming from downstairs. I didn't want to go look, but I had to know what was happening. Grabbing my phone, I cautiously made my way downstairs. The dollhouse was still on the coffee table, but something was different. The tiny lights inside the house were flickering, casting eerie shadows. The doll was no longer in the living room where I'd last seen it. Instead, it was now in the tiny kitchen, its eyes fixed on me. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't possible. Dolls don't move on their own. But there it was, in a different room, as if it had walked there. Panic set in. I wanted to leave, but something kept me rooted to the spot. And then, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were 2 more dolls inside the house now, standing next to the first one. Where had they come from? They weren't there before. Their tiny faces were turned toward me, their painted eyes full of malice. I backed away slowly, my breath quickening. I needed to get out of the house, away from whatever this was. I grabbed my keys and ran for the door, but as I reached for the handle, I heard a whisper soft, chilling and unmistakable.
Don't go.
I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The voice was coming from the dollhouse. I turned slowly, dread filling every part of me. The dolls were now at the edge of the dollhouse, as if they were about to step out. Without thinking, I bolted out the door, not stopping until I was halfway down the street. I didn't care that I was in my pajamas, or that it was the middle of the night. I just needed to get away. I spent the rest of the night at a friend's house, too terrified to go back. The next morning, I called my parents and told them everything. Of course, they didn't believe me, who would? But when we returned to the house, the dollhouse was gone. The coffee table was empty, as if it had never been there at all. I don't know where it came from or where it went. I'll never forget that night. I'll never trust a dollhouse again. Whisper in the walls.
Void Visions AI.
Horror movies were fun, but they weren't real. At least, that's what I thought until last summer. My parents decided to spend a weekend at our family vacation house on the outskirts of Pine Ridge, off Maplewood Avenue. My sister Emma had a school trip, so I was left alone in the big, creaky house. It had been years since I'd stayed there, and I was looking forward to a quiet weekend. The first night was uneventful. I watched TV, had some snacks, and fell asleep on the couch. The house made its usual noises. Creaking floors, the wind against the windows. Nothing unusual. But the second night, things got strange. I was in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge, when I heard it. A faint whisper, so soft I thought I imagined it.
Help me.
I froze, listening closely, but heard only the hum of the washer. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the wind. But deep down, whispers continued throughout the night, sometimes clear, sometimes just a faint murmur.
Please find me.
The voice sounded sad, desperate, as if it came from within the house. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the TV or my phone, but the whispers persisted. I checked every room, but found nothing. The air felt heavy, like the house was waiting for something. My heartbeat quickened whenever I passed the hallway closet, a narrow space I'd always avoided as a kid. Something about it felt wrong, but I couldn't say why. Around midnight, I decided to go to bed. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard a soft thud behind me. I turned quickly, but the hallway was empty.
Don't leave.
The whisper came again, louder, closer.
Don't leave.
It sounded like it was coming from the walls themselves. My hands shook as I reached for the light switch. The hallway looked normal in the dim light. I took a deep breath, telling myself it was just my imagination. But as I reached my bedroom door, I felt a cold breeze brush past me, as if someone or something had just walked by. That night, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, the whispers started again.
Don't leave. Please find me. Don't leave.
Growing louder, more insistent. I could almost make out words, but they were jumbled, overlapping, like multiple voices trying to speak at once.
Please find me.
My chest tightened with a growing sense of dread. By early morning, I'd had enough. I texted my parents, telling them I wasn't feeling well and asking them to come back early. No reply. I tried calling, but the signal was weak and the calls wouldn't go through. As the sun began to rise, I decided to pack up and leave. I wasn't staying in that house another minute. As I stuffed my bag, I heard a whisper, clear as day.
Look in the closet.
I froze, my eyes drifting to the hallway closet I'd always avoided. Something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe fear, made me walk towards it. My heart pounded as I reached for the doorknob and turned it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but old coats and boxes. I let out a shaky laugh, feeling foolish. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A small, faded photograph tucked behind a box. I picked it up, my blood running cold. It was a picture of a little girl, no older than 7, with big and sad eyes. Written on the back, in shaky handwriting, were the words,
Help me.
My heart raced as I dropped the photo and slammed the closet door shut. I didn't wait another second. I grabbed my bag and bolted out of the house, not looking back. When my parents returned that afternoon, I told them everything. They brushed it off as a bad dream, but I knew what I heard, what I saw. To this day, I can still hear those whispers in my dreams, pleading, begging for help. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder what would I have found if I had stayed.
Void Visions AI.